The Potters listened, intrigued by the story of how Unity Lake had come to be. They had read about Harmony's founding, but hearing about it from people who had lived it made it come alive in a different way. Mrs. Potter found herself asking questions she hadn't even realized she was curious about: how the school system worked, what kind of community programs were available, and how safety was maintained. The Haynes answered each question with enthusiasm, sharing stories about the programs they were involved in, from mentoring initiatives for local youth to neighborhood cleanup drives. The Potters were struck by how invested everyone seemed to be in the well-being of the community, and it made them want to be part of it. By the time they left the Haynes home that evening, they felt a growing excitement about the possibility of making Unity Lake their new home. The next morning, the Potters gathered in their hotel room to discuss their experiences so far. They had come to Unity Lake with some doubts, but their time with the Haynes family had left them with much to consider. Mr. Potter started the conversation by voicing how different Unity Lake was from what they had expected in a good way. He mentioned how the warmth of the people, the forward-thinking nature of the community, and the shared sense of purpose reminded him of the small town where he had grown up, but with a futuristic twist. Mrs. Potter agreed, saying she felt a sense of belonging there that she hadn't felt in other places they had considered moving to. Their children, who had made fast friends with Kayla Haynes, were also eager to move. They were fascinated by the advanced technology of Harmony and were excited about the prospect of living in a place that felt like it was part of the future. As they talked, they realized that their initial hesitation had been largely based on fear of the unknown. The fact that Unity Lake was predominantly made up of families who didn't look like them had caused a moment of insecurity. Would they be welcomed? Would they fit in? Would they be accepted? But their experiences had shown them that these fears were unfounded. They had been welcomed with open arms, and they were already forming connections that they hadn't anticipated. Mr. Potter looked out of the window, his eyes scanning the skyline of Harmony, with its glittering buildings and sprawling greenery. He turned to his family, a smile forming on his face. "I think this could be it," he said, and the rest of the family nodded in agreement. The Potters felt their second thoughts slowly ebbing away, replaced by a sense of excitement about what lay ahead. That afternoon, the Potter children, Emma and Luke, were eager to meet up with Kayla Haynes again. The families arranged to get together at the local park, a sprawling green space that featured play areas, picnic spots, and even an interactive learning zone where children could explore various hands-on activities related to science and nature. When they arrived, Emma and Luke were greeted by Kayla, who was accompanied by a few more kids from the neighborhood. Kayla introduced them to her friends, Kai, whose parents ran the local bakery, and Sophia, whose mother worked at the community center. Within minutes, the children were chatting like old friends, bonding over their shared love for video games, the futuristic gadgets they had seen in Harmony, and the excitement of a potential new adventure. The group made their way to the interactive zone, where they took turns exploring the various learning exhibits. One of the exhibits was a solar-powered gadget building station, where they could assemble small robotic toys using renewable energy. The children laughed and cheered each other on as they put their creations together, racing their robots once they were complete. Watching from a distance, Mr. and Mrs. Potter couldn't help but smile as they saw their children so at ease, already forming connections in this new place. It was as if the barriers that they had feared would be there simply didn't exist. Kids were kids, and when given the chance, they found ways to connect, regardless of background or differences. The day ended with promises to meet up again soon, and as they headed back to their temporary home, the Potter children were more excited than ever about the possibility of calling Unity Lake their own. The following day, the Haynes family invited the Potters to visit Unity Market, a vibrant open-air plaza that was at the heart of Unity Lake's community life. The market was bustling with activity vendors called out their specials, customers haggled good-naturedly over prices, and the air was filled with the rich aroma of spices, fresh produce, and baked goods. The Potters were immediately struck by the diversity of people and goods in the market. There were stalls selling handmade crafts from all over the world, food trucks offering dishes from Jamaica, Nigeria, India, and Mexico, and even a section dedicated to cutting-edge technology and locally produced eco-friendly products. The colors, sounds, and smells created a feast for the senses, and the Potters found themselves drawn into the energy of the place. As they made their way through the market, Monica pointed out some of her favorite stalls, like a bakery run by Kai's parents, where they picked up some warm pastries filled with spiced sweet potatoes. They also stopped by a local artist booth, where beautiful hand-painted canvases depicting scenes from Harmony's natural landscape were on display. Mrs. Potter admired one of the paintings, and the artist, a young woman named Amina, explained that she often painted the sunrise over Unity Lake because it reminded her of the promise of a new day. Mrs. Potter felt a connection with the sentiment and decided to buy the painting as a memento of their visit. It felt symbolic, something to mark the beginning of their potential new life here. By the time they left the market, the Potters felt more at home than they had expected. It wasn't just the advanced technology or the beautiful scenery that made Unity Lake special. It was the people, the stories, and the sense of togetherness that truly made this place feel like it could be their new home. The Potters decided that if they were going to make Unity Lake their home, they needed to meet some of the other neighbors beyond the Haynes family. With that goal in mind, they accepted an invitation to a neighborhood potluck organized at the community hub. The building was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Tables covered with a wide variety of dishes lined the main hall. Children ran around playing tag, and families mingled as they filled their plates with food. The Potters were warmly greeted by their new neighbors, many of whom were eager to introduce themselves and learn about the newcomers. Mr. Potter noticed how diverse the crowd was. People from different racial and cultural backgrounds, all interacting comfortably. A genuine representation of the spirit of harmony. As they moved around the room, the Potters were introduced to more families. They met the Wongs, who had moved from San Francisco and were excited to hear about the Potters' journey. They met the Abels, a Jewish couple who often hosted Shabbat dinners and invited the Potters to join one soon. Emma and Luke, meanwhile, found themselves surrounded by other kids who were curious about them, and soon they were running off to join in on a game of hide-and-seek. Mrs. Potter chatted with a couple who ran a small garden plot in the community and who offered to show her how they grew their produce. The warmth and hospitality they experienced that evening left an impression on them. They felt welcomed, not as strangers, but as future members of a close-knit community. As they sat down to share the meal with their new friends, the Potters knew they were already beginning to find their place here. The Potters sat down together as a family later that night to reflect on everything they had experienced during their stay in Harmony. The initial sense of uncertainty that had loomed over them when they first entered Unity Lake had all but dissipated. What remained was an overwhelming feeling of possibility, hope, and genuine excitement for the future. Mr. Potter spoke first, saying how impressed he was by the spirit of togetherness they had witnessed, how people seemed to come together in ways that transcended differences. He mentioned how conversations he had during the potluck revealed that neighbors regularly supported one another, whether by helping each other with household tasks or participating in community projects to improve the neighborhood for everyone. Mrs. Potter agreed, recalling how much she had enjoyed speaking with the different people she met, and how Unity Lake seemed like the perfect place for their children to grow up. Emma and Luke were practically bouncing in their seats as they talked about all the fun they had had with Kayla and the other kids and how they wanted to be part of such a friendly community. Mrs. Potter smiled as she listened to her children talk. She realized that their excitement mirrored her own. The Potters knew that moving was a big decision, but they felt they had found something special in Harmony. It was a place where the values they held dear were reflected in the way people lived, a place that represented the best version of the future they wanted for themselves and their children.